Bill Hicks already addressed these topics many years ago in his stand-up comedy, Fundamentalist Christians. Do you ever notice how creationists tend to be the ones who even look really unevolved, like so as to demonstrate big furry hands and feet, um, while saying they believe God created them in a single day. So, yep, it does indeed seem like he rushed it. Oh. Now, what needs to be taken into consideration is that, in fact, if psych assessors of you are religious and they aren't beginning to invest behind your back in conceptual gossip about carnality between you and you and a sibling or family member of and if they don't start to do that, because their savior is a human sacrifice to restore, and it just doesn't compute. I don't think it computes with believers either, but it definitely doesn't compute with unbelievers, because in what state have we ever known ourselves to be perfect, utterly perfect, evidenced by being inbred or believing that our entire species is inbred? That does not even challenge a McCain's in a frozen bread pizza, much less or dictionary definition of the word perfect. It's hard, but see, so for every belief that the religionist pays for, either implicitly or explicitly, they are looking for, and what I'll say of all of them is that they want to make their religion empirically look and appear true to them, or because they are to not get that, to not pursue after the Lord has told them, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. They're getting disappointed constantly. Now they believe that Jesus, by merit of his death, his execution, and the narratives that are added in later texts. And please do, and again, note that these narratives are Koine Greek symbols, copied in exact paragraphs, repeated in chunks at a 70 to 90% ratio with regards to the Gospel of Matthew and Luke. So what they've done, what that is absolutely proof of, you would never have even if our language today were like 10 times more simplistic than in Koine Greek. You wouldn't have 3 journalists standing away from each other, working for rival networks, looking at the story of Jesus and writing and covering for it in the exact same chunks of Koine Greek symbols. So they're scattered, and the thing is, the church was originally reluctant to release the Bible to the public. They sent a translator, was set on fire. That it was more restricted than morphine at one point, and this was for ecclesiastical control. That you should go back to your families thinking, well, when it comes to meaning or our passion and drive to be wise, that there absolutely is none unless we consult the priest, and that's how they wanted it. When it comes to psych and psych assessments, these people in the back of their minds are viewing how and why it's morally justifying of the religious claims they're making elsewhere, and I don't think that's right. I don't think they think that's right. I'm sure that that in their training and throughout their training they would have insisted to their educators that that they would know how to keep any religiosity to which they were partial separate from any psych-related endeavour or project in which they involve themselves. Whereas you've got Roger Tall and Gary Hands, neither of whom have any psych license. They've just got they've got something a little more a little more a little more micro scale than the Christian MRI machine. They should call it the INRI machine, so that at least you know why it's is this the invention of a Christian? And it just happens to show the brain is just made up of branches, and that has nothing to do with the tree of knowledge of all good and evil. Unless what if you counter a black spot in the brain that looks like an apple? We certainly don't eat that apple. The tree of knowledge of all good and evil. So the metric that you take going into a study, and this is on a level of idealism, the belief system that you take into a study pretty much makes a paradigm that frames the issue, but from which your results of any project you embark to study, what results will be yielded. So yeah, Roger Tall is a person who is exploitive, not knowing of these, the libertarian progressive concepts of science. He is, in many respects, barbaric. I'm convinced he, bars up to the thought of his mother. And that's just an example of how he decided to move against me for wanting to give myself much needed respite at home. Knowing what he knew about me from 9 years in his employment, and just the examples of things like this, the stress he was putting my mother through, the various people who was getting to worry in various ways. His report that I'm conceptualizing abducting 2 women strapped back to back in bondage. Can you please think of what if us and the bisexual rights movement wants to challenge the police state mentality back, and is suffered by even citizens who think you smell like a citizen's arrest waiting to happen. You know, it's we're within our rights to. If you're saying we don't exist at all as human beings, and that we have no rights, then we've got the right to say back, no, we know where this started. This started with you going. All you have to do is try destroying the Genesis creation story that you are inbred from a garden. Once you've abolished that story, it is a desire for you to want Jesus killed, and killed for the sake of the prosperity of you. Is that still something you want if you put aside and if you embrace evolution? Consider that we emerge from swamps. If you factor all those factors, do you actually still want Jesus put to death? Because something wasn't to the tastes of the practices of Genesis inbreeders, but it certainly wasn't a Granny Smith apple. And I want Granny Smith and Con the Fruiterer to regain market control, market share, monopolies on both green and red apples. And so something wasn't to the fucking taste. Notice how the woman's created out of the man's rib. The man's telling the story, however, to a scribe. The man's not going to tell the scribe, well, our king has married me off to my niece, cousin, sister. So as we practice intercourse, I find that I'm not enjoying the oral sex at all. Not enjoying the oral sex at all to the point of obscuring the view of oral sex by pointing the rib cage out so that he doesn't have to look down and notice her head, and then tells the scribe, okay, now I need you to say all mankind, God created one man first, notice the man was lonely, remove one rib. This story will work because it'll explain why. They'll go, yeah, males actually do have one less rib. How incredible! This is a winner. It offers an account for one empirical fact about male anatomy, but it doesn't a lot of other things. It limits why women exist to a scope where they're just there to remedy the phenomenology of loneliness in males. What if woman wants to be alone? What then? Why is it that even in the New Testament you aren't protesting what you're calling yourself progressive churches putting together multimedia fucking documentaries, mockumentaries, in that they are an insult to a dignified journalistic process of inquiry. But you know, what's been constantly portrayed is that snake bites are known to be poisonous, so there's a taste factor there. The apple on the tree of knowledge of all good and evil. The tree doesn't have consciousness. The tree can't think. The tree can't, much less hold the knowledge, much less relay it in linguistic terms that the Genesis author would understand, and explain how and why you're not, especially not a woman, should have a bite into any apple off this tree, though a snake will be tempting her constantly, or else a curse will be placed on the entire planet, and the only thing that will cure that curse is the murder of Jesus Christ. It's a very sick and disgusting religion, but what I think it's constantly showing is that within these kingdoms, forced marriages were going on, and it often meant probably even direct siblings being married, cousins being married, a male marrying a younger niece, and then just not, and because they're keeping their family bloodlines pure. But what they're not getting is that the revitalized sense of enjoying companionship and things like this. They're instead turn-offs, and so they're turn-offs, and the guy can't, the prince or king can't work out why. So he hammers this out by speaking dictatorially to a scribe. And what constantly bears out is that in the narrative of the Genesis story, that incestuous reproduction is to be implied to you as the only means. If you're Christian, you owe your gratitude to incestuous origins. So because of it, you believe a whole bunch of media gossip. You believe a whole bunch of psychological talk. We feel that this based on what a stolen cassette full of jokes. We suspect foul moves of a disturbing nature were made when anatomy was prepubescent. So things aren't thinkable at certain stages of childhood. You'll even laugh at the word penis. So only monotheistic Christians would think to say, and it's what they want relief from. Trust me, they know they don't want relief from apples. They'll feel that they want to get away from being inbred, yet they chose to impose the ideology on themselves. So what I do think they get for it is a glimpse into how these ancient kingdoms worked. But please understand that it was much more barbaric back then, and also understand that when a criminal predator focuses on a single individual, writes numerous books about him, some of which get called the Apocrypha, some of which get called the canonical Gospels, then what that fact alone proves in principle is that though one amongst the conquered Jews, this person seemed to inspire wisdom just of his own initiative, and so for that reason he was killed after being accused of an incoherently. So You know, that's not martyrdom. That's also not a person going, oh, I just want to die for my religious cause. That's a like a Islamist with a van and some dynamite, wanting to destroy his own trace. You know, I think that do I still have fucking cool? I still do have a cigarette here. Yeah, I think uh, whether known or not, and in fact, John's introduction has a poetry to it that I think has an honest streak in terms of its author believing it. In the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then the Word became flesh. It's like another way of saying we don't know with what word to describe Jesus. That's sort of what they're admitting right at the start of. But it's also clear that what the major test was for them to get into these Abrahamic religions were tests like, would you be willing to sacrifice and kill your own son to prove your love of God? And if you say yes, that even that means to bear intent, they'll say you passed the test and are now approved of in God's eyes, and that I think is disgusting. If I had a kid, I would say, look, I'd be saying, this is a book that you're going to find throughout life, scattered everywhere. But it's like a record of Earth's horrid crimes and offences. So assess it in a falsifying manner. Consider how disgusting all the enslavement is, how disgusting the crucifixion is, and you know, so yeah. Suppose I should have that last smoke. Yeah. So another right concerning that, I'm abused by the media as a child because the conflict between my parents in the article makes no mention of me. Why I do want it still to be readable online is because as the survivor, mother deserves the recognition. As a survivor, my sister deserves the mention. What they did do was make no mention of me, and I was in Sydney 6 months prior to this domestic conflict, and without discussion over phone, really. So whatever brewed up and precipitated this conflict, I wasn't. I was simply not there to assess and estimate the factors leading up to it. I know what I know about genetics, the heart, and the impact of Christianity onto and I love my nan. which she was in now. Anyway, yeah. So this is 23, 25 minutes. Okay, yeah. So in closing, with the implications of Genesis being if they're not confronted directly by a psychiatrist, psychologist, and a note has been passed to them by a copper saying, "Oh, we've got proof of an incident during adolescence." It was absolutely, they're actually the ones thinking in pedophilic terms. And if they don't give full disclosure of the documents that they've written, but pass them behind your back to a psychiatrist who's religious, the psychiatrist will believe the cop while leaving you uninformed altogether. Like I say, you think this frisking in police watch houses is helping motherfuckers cultivate a love for wisdom and the truth? No, it absolutely fucking is not. And they frisk you again the very next morning when you were sleeping in locked in a room in the custody of them. Why pat and touch your genitals and dick again before sending you to speak to a magistrate court judge? The only way to account for that, for being frisked again in the morning, is that the cop wants contact with your sexual organs, or else they wouldn't be permitted. And that's part of why they're disgusting on a sexually sickening level. They've assaulted me twice. First time worse than the second. But then they chose to take me to Calvary Hospital because I've already made enough and just sent out enough reports on Calvary Hospital as a hospital named after the idea that Jesus' death was a volitionary choice that he made of his own. He made a decision he made himself, thinking, all the nurses will be able to retire with a comfortable pension because I'll endure the cross. 2,000 years before any of them are born. That's what Calvary is about. Jesus marching up a hill to die as a human sacrifice, but out of his own volition. He chooses it. He chose it. So you're supposed to be thankful for his death. And then as a result, you're off wearing crosses, hanging crosses up in your home, and you're waiting for Jesus to return. Why will you show him a cross when he returns? Will you cane him with it and say, "Look, I'm very cross that you're this late, Lord Jesus." I think the AFP operate on nothing but violations of the Religious Discrimination Act in terms of ideology. What they need to be aware of at the level of instinct is that just as these ancient kingdoms were packed to the head with either idealistic or empirically known empirical experiences of incestuous acts, the idealism alone is enough to stimulate the appetite for the destruction of the psychosexual opposite. And so the psychosexual opposite to a bunch of inbreds is a bilateral or bisexual mind. So yeah, I'm quite within my rights to say, no, police, you're not to talk to me again without, uh, yeah, appropriate warrants, appropriate proofs of my safety. Wow, I feel the cigarette telling me I could be surveyed this very moment. It's saying, but be careful. See, the cigarette has a but. Anyway, now, yeah, there is no way that Freemasonry is doing anything but concealing its tracks with this claim that it's unifying the world's religions, though where it would start and hit a wall of unsolvable conflict is, incestuous origins being the only chance the species would have to grow up and survive. Whereas I believe, that there could have been astral phenomenon. We've watched it stop snowing in the past couple of decades. What if before we had the tools there were star collisions with ponds where non-inbred monkeys were rooting each other, and then they but in batches, and so because Christians even they don't just frame the issue in terms of a report they write up, they'll frame the question, which is it's based on the "Are you the King of the Jews?" Because you can already sense that gusto, and it reminds you of church right away. But yeah, I'm offended with police and the way that I've been treated by police. These police have probably gone home and overly confident about rooting their misses or hitting their misses because of what I represent. The ideas that I represent is costly to what they claim to be the basis and the justification for all moral dignity on behalf of all humanity, and they're just here to humbly serve and protect. There is a line in the song, "Fuck a man, white knuckle tied through black and white." Count your days, Roger Mark. We keep counting.